day one, we have pointed out that the Muslim Brotherhood has basically been financed by British intelligence for more than 90 years. And that the revolution that we're seeing sweep all over the Middle East and North Africa, the epicenter, of course, being Cairo and Egypt, is a globalist operation to destabilize the Middle East. And with amazement today, I watched Glenn Beck, and he was talking about that, saying that it's a destabilization campaign. But he was saying that it was only George Soros and Van Jones. Van Jones is at the top of the pyramid on his chalkboard. He's the leader. Van Jones is some low-level nobody. The Washington Post reported many years ago that tens of millions of dollars have been spent by the federal government to ship school books to Muslim schools around the world, radicalizing Muslims against the West. It's our own Department of Education under both political parties that promotes Arabic in schools as part of their Tower of Babel Balkanization multicultural move. And that's the problem. Glenn Beck is telling you that the caliphate, which is basically just the rebirth of the Ottoman Empire, is this organic socialist Muslim movement, and that they're somehow teamed up with George Soros. Teamed up with George Soros? Even the London Telegraph has the headline, Egypt protest, America's secret backing for rebel leaders behind uprising. And Glenn Beck would say, well, see, that's liberal Obama. Liberal Obama, financed by the same Wall Street that funded George W. Bush and Karl Rove and his gaggle of crooks. It's on record that Zbigniew Brzezinski helped set up the Mujahideen, now known as Al-Qaeda, in the Afghan war. It's on record that Anwar al-Awlaki, the supposed #1 guy under Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, when he was on the most wanted list, was meeting secretly at the Pentagon 2 months after 9/11 with the Secretary of the Army. Even Glenn Beck's own Fox News has reported that. It's on record that under Bush, U.S. embassies were ordered to let the supposed hijackers travel from Saudi Arabia into the United States, and said they're not really terrorists, they're working for us. It's on record that the State Department was given orders by an unnamed U.S. agency, the State Department's admitted this, to help get the underwear bomber on the plane. Do you think George Soros is doing that? Glenn Beck is engaged in a limited hangout. He's saying everything's Van Jones, everything's George Soros. Those are distasteful, bad people. But what he's not explaining to you is that radical Islam has been controlled by the British pre-World War II, on record, then by Hitler, and then by Western intelligence based in the United States. It was radical Muslims that were used to overthrow Mohammed Mossadegh in Operation Ajax in 1953 because he was trying to modernize his nations and trying to keep their oil money for themselves. The globalists want radical Muslims who are oppressing women and dominating their regions so that they can keep them in squalor and use them as an enemy against the West, so the New World Order can build up a police state here domestically in the name of countering it. And Glenn Beck and his writers, who fill his teleprompters, know this. And this attempt to keep the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa in the Stone Age has been going on for decades and is a grand strategy of destabilization. So Glenn Beck gets that right. This is destabilization. But he doesn't tell you that there are mega world government promoting corporations. He tells you that it's all Van Jones and George Soros. Sure, George Soros is one of this gaggle of corrupt globalists, but he's only one of them. Glenn Beck tells you now about the New World Order and world government. But does he tell you that General Electric and Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and all these institutions helped fund the creation of the UN? No. See, this is full spectrum dominance. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about are masters at controlling all points on the compass and playing three-dimensional chess, being able to foresee how things are going to develop and how the dominoes are going to fall. And so, yes, they don't want a pliant dictator that does what they say but brings stability to the Middle East. They now want a stratagem of tension to create this great clash of civilizations. And that's what Glenn Beck isn't telling you. Glenn Beck is a knowing dupe, a willing Joseph McCarthy. Now, I admire Joseph McCarthy. So let me be specific about this. He was a well-meaning person who was an unconscious dupe. Glenn Beck clearly is a conscious dupe. He's very intelligent. We have moles inside his organization. We know exactly what's going on. We know that they take the information that I cover, that Ron Paul covers, the true grassroots movement that we're leading, and they synthesize it and turn it into a neocon light system so they can control the patriot revolution against tyranny in this country. Now, he may not be evil himself individually, but he is someone who has come with the Fox News logo to co-opt the liberty movement in this country. And he's done a lot better in the last 6 months or so. We challenged him to cover eugenics. We've challenged him to cover the global population reduction program. And he's come a long way because you're putting pressure on him to do that. But in the final equation, he's taking on this patriotic camouflage because he needs to have your confidence at the key moment when they put the next neocon savior into place, stage terror attacks, and try to clamp down this Homeland Security police state grid that all administrations from Jimmy Carter right through to Barack Obama have been continuing to build. The bureaucracy is moving forward, setting up the control grid. That continuity of agenda is absolutely key to understand this. But going back to Joe McCarthy, a well-meaning guy being conned versus willing dupes like Obama and Glenn Beck, if you go back and study what happened with McCarthy, it's incredible. You'll understand what's happening now. When he was setting up a police state and interrogating file clerks at the FBI and talking about how communists were hiding under every desk, he was loved because the government could set up a police state surveillance grid and get Americans to give up their cherished Bill of Rights and Constitution in the name of countering the horrible, tyrannical, Stalinistic threat. But then McCarthy did deep research and came out and said, I've discovered the U.S. Army and the State Department is helping Russia and building factories and selling us out to them. I've discovered that our government has helped turn over China to the communist. And the media laughed and cackled. And Joe McCarthy went overnight from being this big messianic hero who could do no wrong because he was countering the communist threat by calling for the destruction of our own liberties. See, by facing that devil, we dance with the devil, we become the devil, they're able to centralize control. But as soon as he found out that the White House, that the Pentagon, that the State Department were actually funding communism and supporting it, overnight he was politically destroyed. They laughed at him. They said, sir, do you have no decency? And he was politically destroyed with all the dirt that they had on him for the alcoholism and the rest of it. He was only human. But you see, Glenn Beck isn't making that mistake. He isn't telling you that the Pentagon and the State Department are helping get underwear bombers on planes. He's not telling you that Anwar al-Awlaki, the #1 guy under Osama bin Laden, who's running the underwear bomber, the Times Square attack, the Fort Hood shooting, the shoe bomber, is admittedly a globalist agent. This isn't our military at the top. It isn't our government at the top. It's a foreign banking cartel that's stolen tens of trillions from us. And they are financing the Muslim revolutions. They are financing the socialist revolutions. The big mega banks have always funded socialism because they get the horde, the mass, the angry mob to loot the middle class thinking they're going to get part of the money. They get chicken feed, poultry, table scraps, and the rest of it is transferred to corporate welfare, to the defense system, to trillion-dollar banker bailouts. And Glenn Beck will not do what McCarthy did. He'll tell you there's communists all day, and there are, but he won't tell you that they're funded by the big mega banks. Oh, he'll pick out George Soros, who's definitely a dangerous globalist, but he'll leave it at that. He's splitting it again into a left-right paradigm that, oh, there's this liberal Soros, he runs it all, when Soros is only one small piece of this larger system. Yes, it's true that George Soros-connected groups have been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and other organizations that are trying to take over Egypt. But it's also true that our Pentagon and the State Department and our government has been financing them for decades. And that's what Glenn Beck isn't telling you. That's what he won't talk about. Because if he did that, he'd be destroyed just like Joseph McCarthy. But the difference is Joe didn't know what he was doing. Glenn is willingly engaging in this duplicity. Any way you slice it, Van Jones is not at the top of the pyramid. Yes, George Soros is very near the top, but he's only one operative in this system. And the whole world is a stage, and each of us players upon it. Let's not let Glenn Beck co-opt the answer to 1984, 1776 movement. You are that movement. Ideas are invincible when they have truth on their side. Ideas are bulletproof. And Glenn's come a long way. That's why I'm not making my film about Glenn Beck. That's why I'm not attacking him, even though every time I watch, I see the deception. Because we're trying to get him to move truly towards the spirit of 1776. And if we demand liberty and freedom, the system will respond. And that's beginning to happen. We told you day one that this was a destabilization program to plunge the Middle East into flames. And now, 3 weeks later, it's all being confirmed. This is a lot bigger than George Soros, and that's the point I'm trying to get across to you. This is very sophisticated, very complex, and if we're going to have true liberty, folks need to do their research and find out the truth for themselves. It's a lot more complex than a chalkboard with some socialist unions and Van Jones. And yes, Glenn Beck overall tells the truth that these powerful communist elites want revolution to destabilize things so that they can come to power. But what he doesn't tell you is that the mega banks have always promoted communism for the common man as a way of outlawing their competition, and through government, taking our tax money and putting it into offshore havens that are immune from the socialistic communism that they visit upon us. Glenn, tell the full truth. Don't tell us that the New World Order just started and George Soros created it.
George Soros's people told mine in a very threatening way, the ship has already sailed. There will be a new world order. Get on the team or get out.
And I've seen you move in the right direction. Come all the way. And I give you my word that I will support you at that point. I want to see you do the right thing. I don't want to see you sit there and play into this Muslim phobia when on record Republicans and Democrats are part of the social engineering system and are doing everything they can to protect radical Muslims. The evidence is right there. Our own government is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, who's calling to break the peace treaty with Israel to destabilize the region. I'm honored and thankful at many levels that you're taking our information. But I'm also frustrated that you still twist it. People out there need to understand that Alex Jones isn't your leader. Glenn Beck isn't your leader. Common sense, the Bill of Rights and Constitution is the sheet of music we need to be singing from. And Glenn Beck talks about how he loves the spirit of 1776. But on so many fundamentals, he doesn't support that Bill of Rights and Constitution. And he says, don't support it when we're fighting the Muslims, but the radicalized Muslims are on record funded by his bosses. You want to find the New World Order, look at Rupert Murdoch, Glenn. Rupert Murdoch is a big Davos attendee, promotes globalism, promotes carbon taxes, promotes everything George Soros does. But because he's cloaked in the Fox News mantle, he's not criticized. Awake Americans that we've awakened are just some market for you to exploit. And that's wrong. This is life and death we're dealing with. And until I see Glenn Beck talk about Anwar al-Awlaki working for the Pentagon and running all the terrorists, and until I hear Glenn talk about the See Something, Say Something campaign and how it's all meant to have us tattle on each other, we know that you're working for the dark side. All right, Glenn, you can't have it both ways. Decide which side you're on. And now is the time to get involved and expose the globalists, but not just their communist henchmen, but the actual controllers. It is extremely exciting that Glenn Beck is having to talk about the New World Order and world government, even if he's blaming it on mid-level patsies. It shows how far our movement to get the truth out is. The fact that this information has become so mainline shows that a renaissance of liberty, a rediscovering of the spirit of 1776 is upon us. And each and every one of us don't have front row seats to history. We're active participants on the field. And to all of you that have gotten the word out over the years, to all of you that have stood up and told the truth and been laughed at by your neighbors, they're not laughing now. The people are ready to hear the truth. Get out there. Together, we can accelerate this awakening process. And we can ensure that there is a force of awakened people that understand the true paradigm, and we can defeat this new world order.